We're going to get into some serious news now. Obviously, this is a rescue mission, and only in Israel do rescue missions feature, I guess, the slaughter of hundreds of people. There is a hostage rescue operation that took place. Israel rescued 4 of the hostages alive from Gaza. In the process, they killed hundreds of people. Israel carried out its largest hostage rescue operation since the war with Hamas began, rescuing 4 out of central Gaza amid heavy fighting. At least 94 Palestinians dead. That number was 94 in the beginning. That number has increased to 150 official, and now the final tally is 210. One of the 4 rescued Israeli hostages, Noah Al-Gamani, is seen in a medical center smiling and talking on the phone. The Israeli prime minister was among the callers. She was last seen pleading for help while being abducted on Hamas. She was actually last seen in a video where she announced that Israel had murdered 2 of the captives she was with via airstrikes, but Al-Qassam soldiers were able to rescue her from under the rubble. She was also one of the hostages that they prominently said was like suspected of being raped and would give birth. Like that was another like insane thing that people were doing. Look, I'm glad that the hostages have been released. It's just that there is a way to do this without killing a single person. That's too rich for Israel's tastes. So they don't want to do that. So they're going to keep using the hostages to bludgeon the entire Palestinian population over and over again. This is one of the very few successful hostage extraction missions that have been conducted so far. There was literally one other, I think, if I recall correctly, beyond this, like one other instance. And the only other instances have specifically been Israel directly shooting the hostages or Israel bombing the hostages. According to Barak Ravid, a senior official in the American administration tells me the U.S. abductee unit located in Israel helped the effort to free the 4 abductees, they're saying. The American soldiers stationed on the pier even threw us 2 sixes of water.
Kieran Moodley reporting there. Well, earlier I spoke to Sharon Lifshitz in Tel Aviv, whose elderly parents were both taken hostage on October the 7th. Her mother was freed later that...
And how the are you glad that you got extracted when 200 Palestinians died? I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. I don't want the Israeli hostages to be killed. I want the Israeli hostages to be freely returned to their homes, to their families. Except I want there to be the exact same care and consideration for the Palestinian human beings that are being trapped inside of Israeli facilities as hostages as a bargaining chip on the Israeli side. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that this is being posted as a when 200 human beings were mercilessly slaughtered in the process. It really shows you the dynamic and how little care or consideration is given to the Palestinian humans. They're just simply a number, simply a statistic, simply a casualty. You just saw harrowing pictures of babies, not just shred up children, not just people under the, like kids under the age of 18, like little babies with bruises, with serious wounds. The hostage that they're talking about in that situation is Noah specifically is an IDF soldier as well. Like that was fundamentally in that process a prisoner of war. Many of the hostages that are remaining, aside from like some of the hostages that haven't been extracted yet as a consequence of Israel's unwillingness to negotiate, at this point most of the hostages that are remaining are IDF.
I began by asking for her reaction to the rescue of the hostages today.
I feel very, very happy for them, for their families, for the hostage themselves to come out of it. We have become a real family, all the hostage family, and so these are people that we know. And
yeah, I mean, Francesca Albanese said the same thing. Relieved that 4 hostages have been released, it should not have come at the expense of at least 200 Palestinians, including children, killed and over 400 injured by Israel and allegedly foreign soldiers while perfidiously hiding in an aid truck. This is humanitarian camouflage at another level. Israel has used hostages to legitimize killing, injuring, maiming, starving, and traumatizing Palestinians in Gaza, and while intensifying violence against Palestinians in the rest of the occupied territory and in Israel. Israel could have freed all hostages alive and intact 8 months ago when the first ceasefire and hostage exchange was put on the table. Yet Israel refused in order to continue to destroy Gaza and the Palestinians as a people. This is genocidal intent turned into action, crystal clear. We know that since day one, Israel has had no interest in freeing the hostages at all and simply using the hostages as an opportunity to keep pummeling Gaza into the ground, reducing it to rubble. This is why I've never allowed that into the discourse at all, ever taken that into consideration. Israel's actions showed that. And right now, today, in one of the only successful hostage extraction missions that Israel has conducted, and who knows if they killed other hostages in the process, by the way, of this extraction, in the bombing campaigns, Israel will turn around and be like, yeah, see, we did it. A massive success. And the media will go along with it and report on this as though this is a phenomenally successful military operation. It's not. It's anything but that. If the United States of America conducted an operation similar to this, it would be considered an abject failure, because it is. Abu Ubaidah made a statement saying that Israel killed more captives than they retrieved. Yeah, there's eyewitness testimony from the ground saying that humanitarian aid trucks might have been used in the process, like they were hiding, but I don't know how that worked. And I also don't know if there was a actual direct U.S. involvement beyond or utilizing the pier. Barack Ravid has reported that the U.S. administration was involved to a certain degree in the hostage extraction. Of course, if you don't personally think that Palestinians are human beings, you think, wow, what a major dub. And many people don't think Palestinians or Arabs are human beings in general, so they are going to post this as a major dub. Look at this. It's a successful operation. Jews, you hate Israelis. You want them all to die. That's what the counter will be to all of this statement, not recognizing that killing 210 plus Palestinians, 400 wounded, is unimaginable cruelty, especially because the notion that there isn't an alternative, a peaceful alternative to all of this, is ridiculous. Israel's own ceasefire deal. Remember, Joe Biden brought up Israel's own ceasefire proposal that suspiciously Israel is refusing to abide by its own deals. The red line that Joe Biden supposedly put forward. It's just very interesting that all of that is in the rear view mirror now. We welcome the rescue of 4 hostages who, after 8 months of captivity, have finally been reunited with their families in Israel. The United States will not rest until every hostage is returned home. The proposal that President Biden outlined 8 days ago would bring relief to both the people of Gaza and the remaining hostages and their families through an immediate ceasefire that could lead to the release of hostages, a surge of humanitarian assistance, Gaza's reconstruction, and an enduring end to the war. The only thing standing in the way of achieving this ceasefire is Hamas. It's time for them to accept the deal. They're still going along with Hamas is not accepting this deal narrative. I feel like I'm losing my mind here. Diplomatic cable leaked to me reveals Biden admin is worried about social media posts claiming its Gaza aid pier will lead to a U.S. military involvement in the area, which it calls disinformation, despite the fact that the pier was paid for and positioned by the Pentagon. I mean, it's not very good. Like, the propaganda overall is not very good. It's pretty easy to parse through, and I hope that more people start recognizing this. And that's it. I don't know what else to say other than the fact that they're just blatantly lying. It's kind of wild how glaringly obvious and how easy it is to parse through the lies too. 7 hostages have been released with these operations, but the IDF will now make special op porno most of the population can jerk off to, while the hostages keep being killed. We'll forget the 4 hostages just announced dead. We'll forget the story from yesterday about the former head of negotiations team saying way before the ground offensive we could have gotten women and children out without releasing a single murderer. I'm happy Noah's home, but can't celebrate for obvious reasons. I don't know how to describe this other than, like, the most revealing aspect of all of this is something that many of you already knew in this community, which is that Israel does not think Palestinians are human beings, and neither do many in this population as well. There is no clearer indication of this reality than the reception. Like, it is not seen as like an insanely bloody, murderous rampage, and instead seen as a simple, successful hostage extraction mission. People just don't give it. I don't know how else to talk about it other than people simply have lost sight of their own humanity in this process. Genuinely curious, why are you upset at the lack of mention of the death associated with the hostage rescue when nothing has been verified, but at the same time you also speak about how nothing from Israel has been verified? Brother, what do you think this is? The lack of verification comes from U.S. involvement, but when a media outlet, a Western media outlet especially, which has no interest in like reporting on the humanity of Palestinians on any other day, says it, this is as close to verification as you're going to get. What do you mean? Also followed 13 minutes ago, but genuinely curious. I love when people just hit the just curious when they're not actually just curious at all. I don't mean this to be provocative. I just want to know how you determine what is propaganda and what isn't. Do you think that the footage that they showed you can show on television and not the ones of like the father picking up his what he suspects is his dead son whose brain is out of what used to be his skull, and then the son moves a little bit, and then the father rejoices thinking that his son might be alive, only to rush him to the hospital immediately? That's the kind of stuff that they can't show on television, but the stuff that they do show on television is a shit ton of wounded babies and children in a hospital. Beyond that, like, do you think that that's just fake? Is that what you think is going on Western media? Are they also lying? Is that what you think is happening? I try to be as careful as possible, but I started off the day saying that there was only 145 5 dead. That number has reached up to 210, according to the Washington Post. How about you take your curiosities there if you have an issue with this? According to two medical sources at Deir Bala Hospital, locals are still recovering bodies from under the rubble and searching alleys for the market for more casualties. They describe this as the largest mass massacre they've had to handle since the war began. Another thing that you should be curious about is why you immediately go, well, Israel has killed 36,000 plus since October 7, right? Why is it that far? Why is it such a far stretch? Why is it such an unimaginable thing that they would do another hostage rescue mission with the actual intentions of just killing a Palestinians as they have done before? When I get information from Gaza, I weigh it against what I know about Israel's actions. I weigh it against what I know about the Palestinian Health Ministry. There's no reason to lie about it. Joseph Borrell Fontella is High Representative of the EU Foreign Affairs Security Policy Vice President, says, reports from Gaza of another massacre of civilians are appalling. We condemn this in the strongest terms. The bloodbath must end immediately. At POTUS 3-stage plan is the way forward for an enduring ceasefire and an end to the killing. Now,
תודה לכם, היה כועס.
נועה ליפה שלי, אוהבת אותך. יש לנו כיפה שמיים.
this is a pretty good back and forth between Ken Klippenstein and friend of the show, Felix Biederman. To me, the most interesting part of the document is the disarmament policy. It would be nice, but why would Hamas agree to this? You're so close to getting it, my bro. There's nothing to get. Hamas doesn't care about ordinary Gazans, so why would they disarm? To which Felix responds with, what does ordinary Gazan actually mean here? Even just the armed combat wing alone has pretty large numbers in relation to the population of Gaza. Do school teachers and bakers stop being ordinary when they pick up a rifle? Is there some idealized apolitical Palestinian? This is actually very important to comprehend here. This is why I've made the distinction beyond October 7 when talking about Palestinian resistance groups and the role that they play in Palestinian society. The role that they play in Palestinian society since Israel's siege is a defensive one. They are just and well within the boundaries of international law, picking up arms and engaging in a spontaneous militia activity against the occupying force, the Israeli occupying force. Now, obviously, the way we look at the situation, you see people in military fatigues and then you see people in Adidas shirt and, coming out of tunnels, and you're like, well, there's disproportionate asymmetrical warfare happening here. You're not conditioned to understand that those dudes, no matter what they were doing a month prior, whether they were personally involved in Hamas or whether they were not personally involved in Hamas, but are simply now waging war as a consequence of, being forced into waging war, doesn't change that reality. I think everyone is pretty aware that not every single Palestinian supports or even necessarily likes Hamas, but it's absurd essentially to claim that they have no mandate or significant base of support among regular people. Isn't that dangerously close to fueling the fire that the idea of all Gazans are terrorists? Resisting a goddamn military occupation from an incredibly militant, incredibly well-armed nuclear state is not terrorism. It's the nuclear state that is doing terrorism. You are resisting against terrorism. This is why I make that distinction. I think a lot of people fail to recognize that. The terrorists in this circumstance are the Israeli defense forces. The Israeli occupying force is engaging in an unimaginable act of terror with its overwhelming civilian death and destruction.
This morning at 11 a.m., Israeli Special Forces.
This is in English, by the way, so notice that. Something to consider always, just so you know who the audience is that needs to hear this in their minds.
Conducted complex hostage rescue mission and successfully rescued 4 of our hostages from Hamas captivity in Gaza. Noar Gamani, Almog Meir Jan, Plomi Ziv, and Andrei Kozlov. They are back home in Israel. They are alive. They are well. They will undergo medical examination and will soon be reunited with their families in the hospital.
This is a major propaganda moment for the Israeli government. In the eyes of the Israeli government, now there's at least somewhat of a reason for the senseless violence. You know what I mean? That's all it took. How is this a propaganda moment? They killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, and among them their own hostages. They killed 200 plus just to rescue 4. I don't think you understand. It's a propaganda for the Western world, for those who are listening in the Western world that are looking desperately at anything, any W. That's my point. This was bloody. This was traumatic. This was morally abhorrent. But ultimately, the fact that they rescued 4 hostages, including Noah, especially, who was repeatedly talked about, the images of her being kidnapped, repeatedly shown on media for months, that is all it takes. They could have killed 1,000 Palestinians and they still would have thought that's great. It's a phenomenal W. It's propaganda for those internally in Israel that is looking for any kind of success out of this that doesn't just mean dead Palestinian children, recognizing that have an appetite for that kind of death and destruction. The rest of the world is not looking at it with similar lenses. It's also a big W for the likes of the American State Department, who's been desperately trying to defend Israel. 105 freed via temporary ceasefire, 4 hostages released by Hamas, 3 with white flags were killed by the IDF, 4 Israeli rescue missions, 1 hostage killed, 1 soldier saved, 2 hostages saved, at least 74 people killed, 4 hostages saved, at least 210 people killed. This is what I was thinking of. So Israeli attacks on Gaza have killed an unknown amount of hostages in Hamas captivity and at least 36,800 people so far. Really successful. They definitely care about the hostages and their well-being.